I'm Bonnie Riggan, and I have a small farm here in Iowa City. It's called Calico Farm. I've got about a third of an acre in production, and this is what I do for a living. Right now it's right around March 1st, and this is when I really get going, where I'm planting every single day so that I'm ready for May sales. For a home garden or a school garden, it just really depends on when you want to have things to harvest. So the best thing to do is say, hey, if I want tomatoes in August and I'm going to start them from seed, how many days is it until maturity? And then you go do the backwards math and you start your seeds May 1st or April 1st would be the best for tomatoes as an example. So what I have here is a solid bottom tray. They sell these with slots in them too. I like the solid bottom because I like to bottom water. It encourages the roots to grow down, but that's just a personal preference. Either kind of tray is fine. I also like it that the greenhouse just doesn't end up all soaking wet and water dripping out all over. And then I've got my cell tray. And these come in all different configurations. I prefer the 72 cell trays. They work with most of the things that I grow, so pretty universal. So I've got my soil in there. I use a soil from Beautiful Land Products, and it's just a starting mix. It's got a lot of peat in it. It's got vermiculite, and it's got a little bit of compost. And this is an organic one. You can use whatever works for you. The nurseries all have potting mix. Something lighter with a lot of peat in it is really good for seed starting. Once I get the cells a little full, what I like to do is do a little it tamps the soil down, gets it a little bit firm so the roots have something to kind of grab onto without it being too compressed. So then I always put a little water in the bottom because the peat in the soil starting mix takes a long time for the water to absorb, so I like to put that in at the beginning and let it start kind of soaking in from the bottom up. And then I start with my seeds and I just get them in my hand. These are tiny seeds. What I'm doing right now is broccoli rabe, which is like a sprouting broccoli. And so in this case I'm going to put 3 or 4 seeds in each cell, because this can stand to be crowded, and also I want to make sure that I'm getting 100% germination. I don't want any cells empty, so I'll use a few seeds in each cell. Okay, and then once all your seeds are in the tray, you want to cover them lightly. In this case, very lightly with the broccoli rabe, just because they're such tiny seeds. And I use vermiculite, which is just a very light medium that has a lot of mineral in it. You can just use your soil. That's fine too, your potting soil. I like the vermiculite just because it's a little bit lighter. It's easy for the seed to push through once it the seedling to push through once it germinates. And then I just cover it gently. Covering it helps retain the moisture. And then once that's done, I spray the top. Again, I have, I put the water in so the soil is getting wet from the bottom, but then I like to mist the top. With bigger seeds like squash or pumpkins, even pepper seeds, you can top water it to make sure it's all wet. But with seeds that are really tiny, I like to just mist them, so then you're not pushing them out of place or possibly knocking them out of the tray or whatever. I make sure I label this tray and this tray. I like to put the variety or the crop, but typically I put the variety. So in this case, it's just broccoli rabe. And then I put the planting date, which is March 2nd, and then I'll put the days to maturity, which in this case is 42 days. Because then that's a good reminder to me of when I need to make sure I plant it out to make sure that it's mature by the date I expect it. And I can't emphasize enough, make sure that you label your trays, because I used to think, oh, I'll remember. You're not going to remember. Next step, you can either put a dome on it. This plastic dome will help retain water and retain heat. Once you've started seeds in a tray, make sure they stay moist, not too wet, but moist, because then if they dry out, they're not going to germinate. That's universal for all seeds. Some seeds require it to be dark, no light, but most seeds can have a little bit of light. Get it under some lights. In this case, we're doing this in the greenhouse, and so it'll get the light during the day. And I've got protection over here, plastic protection for it to retain heat in the evening. But you want to make sure that your seedlings have the amount of heat that they need. This might vary. Brassicas, for example, can tolerate lower temperatures, whereas the solanaceous crops such as eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, they require a little bit more heat, and you want to be a little more gentle with them. They need plenty of light, so somewhere near a window. A southern window might be too strong. That might be too harsh of sunlight, so morning light is great. But if all you've got is a southern window, just make sure you keep an eye on things and maybe move them into a shady spot on the countertop if you can during the height of the day. If you're growing them inside of just a room in a house or a classroom or something, the temperature should be perfect. One thing is if you can put an oscillating fan on them, that'll help get them stronger. It kind of simulates wind. It'll make them stockier, and then they won't get so leggy. If your seedlings are getting leggy, that means that they're not getting enough light, and you need to increase the light source, whether that's artificial light or just get them closer to the window. And if you're growing them under lights and they look like they're getting leggy, just lower those lights. It seems weird, but sometimes only a couple of inches is all you need between the lights and the seedlings. So this is a tray of green sorrel that I started in February. It is a very cold tolerant plant, so I'll be planting this out as soon as some soil is dried out. As you can see, there are far more than one seedling in each cell. So in order to make sure that a plant thrives, you want to thin that out. So I just go through pretty gently and just pull out. It's easier to thin once they get their true leaves, like this one over here has its true leaves. These are still pretty little. They all have just their cotyledons, which is the first two leaves that appear when they germinate. Try to do it either at the cotyledon stage or when they get their true leaves. Otherwise, they just get too crowded and their root system is so developed that then it gets harder to thin them without disturbing the root system. In this case, you can see, hopefully you can see, this is a nice strong one. The others are still very small. Some are just popping through, actually. But yeah, you choose the one that looks the strongest.